Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus. I am the death metal guy, and I am back here with the black metal guy in an unusual convergence for an interview, because we were both very excited to talk to this artist. So a couple episodes ago, we covered the new record by a recent project called Oldowan Gash, a record entitled Hubris Unchained, on Drakkar Records that both of us were extremely excited about. I don't necessarily want to put words in my co-host's mouth, but I think we can safely say this is an easy top 5 of the year for black metal records for us. And we're fortunate enough to be joined by Forlorn Spirit. So, Forlorn Spirit, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Happy to be here.
Definitely glad to hear it. So, all right. Hubris Unchained, a record we were deeply impressed by, both for its variation, the fact that it's really digging back into sort of primordial late 90s black metal, and really just the elegance with which it's recorded. So tell me a little bit about the project, about Oldowan Gash. So I understand that you did a couple tapes back in 2018. That's how I got introduced to you. I listened to a little bit off some of those tapes, and immediately I showed it to my co-host, and I was like, we need to cover this fucking record when it comes out. So give us a little history.
Well, let's see. I came up with the name maybe in 2015 or 16. And then kind of spent a long time. Well, where do I begin? I've always been invested in black metal music and deeply interested in the underground, but I never felt comfortable making my own project. I had friends, in the early 2000s, or late 2000s rather, doing kind of raw black metal releases on labels like Cocainacopia and stuff, and I always wanted... to myself, I said, if I ever do this, I want to do something that's more serious, more involved. And so, as I got older, I felt more comfortable as a guitar player, and I started working on songs. And so then, I guess in the beginning of the summer of 2018, or maybe it was March or so, I recorded Until the Bees Fly Again. And then maybe 3 months or 4 months later, I recorded Maiden's Tower. And I released them both at the same time, essentially, because when I first did Until the Bees, I just wasn't sure that I even wanted to show it to people yet. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but eventually I made a post on the old Nuclear War Now message board, and with a flyer and some samples online, and sold the tapes myself.
To immediately get into very deep stuff, you were talking about how you came up with the name around 2015 or 2016. We had to do some research for this one. Oldowan referring to like the Olduvai Gorge in, I believe it's Tanzania now. Is there kind of a theme around the project revolving around sort of like archaic humanity, or what's the kind of logic behind it?
Well, I hope I don't stumble through this, but Oldowan, as my understanding, is a term that refers to an early kind of rock tool. Mm-hmm. It's like a rock that's kind of got a sharp edge that was likely used by pre-humans to crack nuts or cut meat or whatever they did. Mm-hmm. So the name Oldowan Gash kind of implies that that they were also used maybe in battle or whatever fights, mm-hmm. like an Oldowan Gash, meaning being, harmed by this tool. And so the idea being, as soon as there was progression, as soon as there was tools, as soon as there was movement forward, there was also destruction, there was also, warfare. And it's kind of the idea that everything we do as, humanity, as society, civilization, whatever you want to say, only increases our ability to destroy ourselves.
Wow, that's way cooler than what I thought. I thought you were just referring to the original Olduvai Gorge. I thought it was kind of a corruption of that, the Oldowan Gash.
Which probably called Oldowan because of the gorge.
Yeah, I would assume that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's something like a hand axe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I imagine people used hand axes to kill each other.
That's probably a safe
as the black metal guy, that's my specialty. It's,
I can't say I've seen evidence of it, but it's hard to imagine they didn't, right?
So you've got those first couple tapes in 2018, and then you've got that gap. I was unfamiliar with the old stuff, but I was very impressed by, obviously I'm looking for stuff to bring onto the podcast, so I'm listening to stuff, I'm kind of skimming through it, but I stopped when I heard And the Bees Fly Again, which I actually thought was the later tape. I didn't realize until now that was actually the earlier.
Don't believe Metal Archives.
So, one thing I was very interested in was, I brought it up to my co-host because I was like, oh, this is kind of like rockish black metal, but done correctly, which is a very hard thing to do. Now, obviously, there's a lot less of this on Hubris Unchained, but can you talk a little bit about, like, the evolution from those early tapes onto the full length?
Well, the biggest step up was I'm a drummer on the LP. I played drums on the first two tapes, and I'm really not much of a drummer at all, and so that kind of inhibited my ability to, when I first came up with the name and started writing music, I envisioned myself doing like programmed drums and all of that, and I am not very computer savvy, especially not at the time. And eventually, I decided, I think it's more real for me if I play drums myself. So I started practicing all the time and kind of teaching myself how to play. And then, through some kind of studio magic, was able to play the drums on those two tapes.
Studio magic? You mean quantizing? Gotcha.
Well, mostly, there was no quantizing, actually. It just, I played, basically 30, 40 seconds at a time, we would stop and then start again.
So just rolling the curtain
back.
All right.
Yeah, I'm pulling the curtain back too much, so we can't let the fans know about that.
You're gonna kill your black metal cred.
Yeah. But so,
excuse me, you're supposed to suck at drums organically?
Well, yeah, because I do love a lot of that stuff. That's really kind of, everything from early Graveland to a lot of the, millions of projects that just kind of have a sloppy feel to it. And I definitely wanted that, but I also didn't want to be like a gimmicky, because I feel like a lot of that stuff nowadays is kind of gimmickly, sloppy or something. So I feel like the early stuff kind of rode the line,
No, I mean, it didn't seem like outstandingly sloppy to me. It sounded like a sort of a rock drummer extending himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about Graveland is...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a thing about is just I have so many things to say about Graveland.
You always do.
Capricornus wasn't he wasn't like a bad drummer. He was he had, whether it was Rob talking the parts to him or him figuring out the parts, he played this incredibly musical style of drums. He was just really drunk when he was doing it and really bad, really technically sloppy. But, he could... The whole thing is he was actually kind of a good drummer, you know what I mean? Whereas when people take that and say, I want to imitate that slop, then you end up with this kind of game of telephone where it's just like, well, now you're just playing drums badly. But he was trying to play drums good.
Yeah, he also kind of, invented some of his own beats that I think people still copy today.
Yes.
But so the big step up... The big step up for Hubris Unchained was definitely having a session drummer, the guy by the name of Darkstar, who also played some live shows with me. That was a huge step because it just made everything so much easier on me. A lot of the riffs that are on Hubris Unchained, predate Until the Bees Fly Again, but they were just too fast for me to play drums to.
Okay.
So that was it was a huge step for me. It was because he was super easy to work with, listened to me when I said, this is what I want, but also had his own ideas when I didn't know what to do. It just made everything a lot easier. I mean, I think we recorded Hubris Unchained in less time than it took me to do each of those tapes because it was just so much more seamless.
I gotcha. So you're, I'm assuming you're a guitarist first and foremost?
Yeah. Guitarist first, for sure.
I gotcha. So, in terms of Hubris Unchained, so is it just a session drummer, or is everything else yourself, or is there a kind of a lineup there?
No, just drums and then me on everything else. So,
Okay.
but the record's pretty simple. It's just 2 guitar tracks and a bass. That's all, and then vocals, obviously.
Yeah, very straightforward. And then I saw online on YouTube you've got a live performance up. Anything you want to say about the live lineup? Are those just buddies of yours that you kind of pulled in, or do you have kind of a pre-existing musical relationship there?
No, so we've played 3 shows with mostly the same lineup, aside from one variation. But yeah, that's the first time I've played music with all of those guys. I've known them, here and there from, other bands or just touring and them coming to my town back in the day. But yeah, that was my first time, getting in a room with those guys and playing with them and, obviously just teaching them my songs.
And as far
so
as
we played 3 shows.
as far as a live set goes, is that going to be is that kind of like everything you've done so far, or are you leaning heavier on Hubris Unchained stuff? Or
So the first 2 shows were just the tapes, obviously, because Hubris wasn't done yet. So the first show was with Bonal and Cirrus and Python. That was the first show we played. Second show was Profanatica, Sortilegia, and I think Black Witchery played.
oh, you fucker! You're playing with Profanatica on your second show ever. It took me 10 goddamn years to play with Profanatica.
Well, yeah, I mean, we played to whoever was there before, 4 hours before Profanatica played.
Yeah, I understand. I've been there, man. I've been there. So.
And then the last show was the one I talked about with you guys before, the Malignant Altar show. Who else played that? Oh, Mortal Wound and Mephitic Corpse. All death metal, an all death metal show. But like I told you before, obviously pre-recording. But I've known the guys in Malignant Altar for a long time because I'm from Texas, and we go way back. And they wanted me to play, and I just said, yeah, I'm not too cool to play a show with my friends.
I would
Also,
hope they would be.
I love their band. I'm not saying that. Just it felt a bit funny to play a death metal show where everyone tunes down super low or whatever. But I think it was cool, and
Honestly, I
obviously
think
hanging out with those guys is great.
I think that works a lot of the time. I've played.
I think some
Oh, go ahead.
variation on the lineup is good.
Yeah, no,
Well,
I think
that show we debuted some of the new songs, so I was excited for that because the new stuff is obviously faster and more aggressive, and it felt better being up there playing the new material. It felt like we were kind of pulling our weight or whatever.
No, definitely. So in terms of, so obviously you've got a couple year gap between those early tapes and Hubris Unchained, and I know that you've said that you've got some riffs dating to before Hubris Unchained, before even the original tape. So what was the kind of meaningful change that you wanted to make, apart from just getting faster and more technical, more accomplished on guitar? What was the progression of the project for you?
That's a good question. I think with Hubris Unchained, one of the things I really tried to do was, the thing I kept telling myself was just get out of my own way and just let whatever is happening happen and try to cultivate. Like, so if I have a new riff, instead of nitpicking that riff, trying to say, okay, what works with this and build upon, these foundations I had.
Okay.
But so, it seems like a big gap, I suppose, but it didn't feel like it. Those tapes technically came out in December of 2018, and then we recorded Hubris Unchained in, I believe, August of 2019. So
it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while to finish the vocals, actually. So the vocals weren't done, I think, till November. But the music we did in a day or two in August.
Obviously, it feels like there's a difference, a substantial difference in the way the music is composed on the early EPs versus Hubris Unchained. Because obviously we've got a much... I know you've talked about, just getting more accomplished as a guitarist, but, the stuff that I've heard off the Maiden's Tower and Until the Bees Fly Again, it's much more kind of like considered, it's more mid-paced, and I don't think that's merely a result of like a lack of, being up to the tempo. I is there a real kind of musical decision made in the difference there?
I just wanted to maximize. I mean, I thought, whatever ideas are present already, whatever, because I've never tried to sit down and say, I want to sound like XYZ records I like, or I want to sound like Polish black metal, or for me it was always just what's coming out, what makes sense, and looking at those two tapes and saying, okay, what have I created, and how do I just make it more melodic, but also more aggressive, and also more, just kind of just juicing it, making it just bigger, better, faster, stronger, whatever,
pure Daft Punk style, right?
Yeah, this secret big influence. No, I mean, I just wanted it to, like I said, kind of get out of my own way and make something that felt like an album and like a real record. I do feel a bit reactionary towards a lot of the other kind of newer black metal stuff that feels very kind of off the cuff, and I don't know, not all of it's gimmicky, but just whatever, like bands that are trying to create something that's obscure and blah blah blah. And for me, I thought, I want to make a real album. I want to make a real black metal record that's got muscles and got legs and got the whole package.
Yeah, I noticed you changed it to a bigger, better, faster, stronger. But so how do you do it? That is the thing that we noticed on the show, is how more than the sum of its parts the record is. Specifically, like there are all these riffs that in themselves are a couple notes with a sort of significant pulse to it or shape to it, and then all sorts of ideas that build on that. And to me, it doesn't sound like you've written it. It almost sounds like you had full ideas for each song before you knew most of what parts went in it, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't sound like you wrote it from riffs up.
I don't know, it's intentional, for sure. I try to really flush things out pretty hard. I do a lot of repetition, playing a riff over and over and over and over again until I feel like I know what's supposed to come next, or I know what the bass part should be, or what the other guitar should be playing.
That's a good idea. That's smart. That makes a lot of sense.
Just, I don't want it, I don't want it to feel overwrought, like I overthought things, but I do want to spend a lot of time on what I'm doing, I guess.
Something that I value a lot in music, I think the death metal guy and I were having a conversation about this once, I think off air, but something I value a lot in songwriting is the feeling of necessity. And it sounds like you're really trying to track that too. And I know what you mean, like sometimes like when you write a riff, the you can come up with a cool riff on the spot, and then everything else you come up with after is just way, way worse until you like walk away from it or something, It's like, I like the idea of playing it over and over again to try to see what comes next.
Yeah, it's kind of it was a fine line. I don't know how boring it is to talk about this kind of stuff, but like...
No, dude, we're all autistic. It's cool.
Yeah, I think I tried to ride the line between shooting from the hip, just kind of like letting whatever happened, but also, really kind of extra crossing my T's and dotting my I's, So just kind of finding a balance of that, trying to let it flow, but also work hard. I don't know.
So what about one of the weird ones? Like, let's see if I can find this. Oh my gosh. I think, what was the one? Feral Spirit we talked about on the show.
Feral Heart,
has this kind of
Feral
Heart, yeah. It's got this kind of really insistent pulse riff in it, and you managed to sustain that a lot. What's the story with a song like that, for instance?
Well, that song was finished super last minute. There was some rehearsal tapes we were making at the time. Me and the drummer, just kind of practicing the songs to go to the studio. And I had that song about halfway done, and I figured, I'll do it later for a 7-inch or something. But a few days before we went to the studio, I felt like I had pieced it together. And so I scrapped the song we had already done and taught that song to the drummer. And yeah, it felt, it obviously sticks out a little bit.
No, don't excuse it. It fucking rules.
No, it's great.
Well, no,
it's
I think it's become my favorite song on the record. It's kind of got a kind of heavy metal feel, maybe a little bit of kind of Greek, that kind of chuggy, Routing Christ, Verathron kind of vibe.
Yeah. But
also not. I feel like that song nails it. I mean, that song. It's got the lyrics. I think are really, really straightforward for what I'm trying to say with the band, and it's kind of anthemic but not goofy.
Well, I mean, the immediate thing that I thought about was obviously a band that we mentioned multiple times in the review. You could probably comment on your influence from them. It reminded me a lot of On a Mule Rides the Swindler from GBK. So just this like very open. It's like it declares itself with the first riff, and it all evolves from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know about that song with GBK, but GBK is definitely a massive influence for me in the sense that, one of the things I think about a lot with black metal, whether when I'm working on Oldowan Gash or whether I'm listening to black metal, I think the best bands, when you throw on the record, you say unquestionably this is black metal. It's not black metal mixed with XYZ or like black metal meets whatever, and it's not some ham-fisted attempt. It's straight up black metal, but at the same time, it's undeniably unique. And I think a band like GBK accomplishes that. A band like Pest from Germany or Wukanaz or Bonal or Sirhus, I think those bands really accomplish that stuff. And that's something I think about a lot with myself. I mean, obviously you can't. I think if you try to create your own sound, you'll fail. But just trying to. I don't know. Also, GBK, they're just the best, and it's like I think about that a lot. I
thought that because the main thing that I heard when I listened to your record was like, "Oh, this is Grand Belial's Key," but honestly, kind of a better articulation of those musical ideas.
Well, I won't even acknowledge that statement, but I think that they're a band who's not afraid to have swagger and say we're the best, and and to present themselves as the best. And I think about that with myself. Taking myself seriously enough to say, this is an important record, and I'm not afraid to have that kind of confidence, not only in my writing but everything.
No, I appreciate
GBK is almost one of those bands that's been kind of off limits for the more, as you say, kind of stylized or deliberately obscure side of USBM, even though a lot of the people making that stuff come out of the punk scene, right? And even though GBK is this incredibly punk thing, but I think it has something to do with how just balls to the wall something like GBK is, right? There's no sort of...
It's fundamentally difficult. I mean, it's like, you couldn't just pick up a guitar and say, I'm going to do a GBK type riff. It's like...
I've tried it. It's very hard.
Exactly. It's not easy music. And that's why a band like that takes, 7 years to put out a record or whatever. But it's a band that takes themselves super seriously. And that's, I think, and a band that sounds individual and a band that sounds, like its own thing. And that's, I've never tried to write a GBK style riff for Oldowan Gash, but I do take a lot of influence from them in other ways, in the sense that like the way that they kind of carry their band and the way that they approach what they're doing is a huge influence for me.
Well, something we've touched on a few times on this show is the idea of, especially recently over the past few years, a really defined idea of USBM. And we were talking a little bit, before the show about how you and us on the show are really like pretty much like exactly the same age. So we're coming from very similar kind of backgrounds in terms of black metal. And I feel like growing up, USBM, I associated...
Sucked ass.
USBM sucked ass. I associated it very early on with, you had your kind of like Norsecore, like Marta clones, like Cult of Azazel. And then eventually you got sort of like... I don't consider it depressive black metal, but a lot of people lumped it into that, like Leviathan and Xasther. But it feels like just over the past, 2 or 3 years, there's maybe an unconscious effort to develop a sort of American black metal sound, which is something we talked about on your record, about this emphasis on sort of like pentatonic riffing and these like kind of bluesy American sounds. Is that something that you intended, or is that coincidental?
It's something that I don't steer clear of. This is the easy way to put it. I think when you talk about like 2000s US black metal, there's definitely kind of two schools of thought. There's like obviously the Xasther, Leviathan, kind of the bigger bands, and also there was stuff that I was getting really into, like bands like Ferdy Dirk and Sirhus, Bonal, Ashpool, even from Canada, Akitsa. Like those were bands that I heard as a young person that really kind of shaped the way I look at black metal. As these bands that didn't sound like Mayhem, or they didn't sound like Immortal or whatever else I'd heard at the time, but they sounded like they had their own spin on something. And especially in the early Ferdy Dirk stuff, you guys talk about that kind of Western Graveland vibe.
Yeah,
I think that Ferdy Dirk invented that, I think.
Interesting. I've never heard that.
Just kind of, yeah, it's really good stuff. And CW Productions they're still active, and it's a really interesting narrative they've created from the first tape to now. It's how they've developed their scene. But those bands influenced the way I think about black metal so much. I mean, even just buying stuff from the distros they ran as a young person, and today, it would always say something like, "Oh, recommended if you like yada yada yada," and then I would go and I would buy those CDs or tapes on Discogs or whatever, because I was like, I wanted more, and I wanted to understand kind of the general narrative of this music. And so I definitely think of kind of Sirhus and Bonal as really massive influences for me, not in the sense that I'm biting their riffs or by their style, but just that they showed me how to make this music your own.
Well, in that case, I gotta get like interrogative and be like, baffling territory. Jesus Christ, the sort of like Americana Western thing with that descending arpeggio you do there. Dude, you were channeling Gold Rush California there, weren't you?
Yeah, and actually another big one, Volon, obviously been big fan of Volon for a long time. He started doing this kind of Ennio Morricone kind of influenced Western black metal thing, and I definitely am not interested in doing something similar to that at all. But like riffs like that are something that would happen while I was working on music, and
let's not get it mistaken. It's fucking sick. I love it, but I'm curious.
Yeah. The Volon started to get really good right about that time, I would say. It's kind of when he came into his own, I think.
Yeah, there's that recent one-sided 12-inch and that song from the Four-Way Split where he really kind of leans into the Western thing. But for me, I think when a weird idea like that pops up, I think, okay, this is presenting itself to me. How do I make it work? And how do I just roll with it? Like I said, kind of getting out of my own way, because whatever is happening when I'm working on music, maybe that's maybe that's bigger than me. Maybe I should just get out of my own way and let whatever's coming out come out.
I like that. I've always appreciated this idea of, very personally, to be an asshole and butt into the interview, the idea that a song is not something that I'm creating, but it's something that I'm unearthing, like an archaeologist. It's something that exists already that I am presenting to people. And it sounds like, not to like butt into you, but it sounds like you've got sort of a similar philosophy there. It's not a super like personal creative process. You're sort of presenting this exterior idea to people. You know what I mean?
Well, it's both. I mean, someone put the phrase to me one time about, reaching out and grabbing the riff out of the air. Just kind of like, it's already there, you just got to grab it. But also, I think if there is some kind of conceptual idea behind Oldowan Gash, it's that it is personal. That whatever I do, I want it to be reflective of me. There's no grand conceptual theme except for me being a man and
the
me
personal
trying
relationship,
to face the world. Yeah, like how do I feel? What do I think? How do I, like the name Hubris Unchained, it means a lot of things, but as a personal thing, kind of learning how to unchain my own arrogance, my own hubris, and to be a man and to face my own kind of triumphs and struggles.
Fucking high tea black metal.
Yeah. Well, I think the high tea black metal thing is very characteristically American. I mean,
definitely.
Also, just the idea. I mean, even the idea. Usually, black metal is not coming from the personal, so it's interesting that it is for you. And I suppose one could relate that to the tradition of American individualism. I'm not saying like American,
that's cool.
American free market political individualism or whatever. But the idea of just, frontier, rugged individualism, right? Cowboy shit.
Yeah, and also, I'm an American millennial. I think I'm the most important person in the whole world. So why wouldn't my band reflect that?
Why wouldn't you make a black metal record about that? Yeah.
Hang on, I've got to pick up a call from my girlfriend. I'll be right back. I'll keep going.
No, it's a good spot to break real quick. All right, so we're back, and so let's keep on the route of like specific song questions. So, Lasso of Fate, a sick track, as are all of them on Hubris Unchained. But I argued the point that these were sort of a rearrangement of the opening couple minutes of The Red Heifer by GBK off Kosherat. So you've already admitted to the substantial GBK influence. So how wrong am I?
Well, the GBK influence, like I said earlier, is heavy, but it's not so much about riffs or song structure. Although they have great song structure. So I don't know. I don't think about bands when I'm writing riffs. I think about trying to, just make something that's personal, make something that's authentic to me, and I think that's what the best bands do.
Well, in that case,
definitely influenced by. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, in that case, you've talked about that a little bit. Like, what is personal to you? What are you trying to convey in your music that is distinctly yourself? Because we, obviously, both of us love your music, but we're tying it to other bands. What is the distinct element of yourself in this music?
Even what's the feeling, just what's the vibe you're trying to capture, the emotion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess.
What is yourself?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was going to say. Is that it's kind of unknowable, maybe, and maybe by doing this stuff, I'm trying to articulate the things that are difficult to articulate, I suppose.
I appreciate that. I respect that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and not that it's some arcane thing, but just, you know, who are we? What is yourself? You know, just trying to pick up the guitar and see what comes out and trying to make it happen and not sit there and think about, oh, well, I like that riff off, you know, His Majesty at the Swamp. How can I rip that off? You know, I definitely try really hard to steer clear of any kind of bullshit like that.
Yeah.
And just let it come out of me, you know.
So, big question that I wanted to ask, just because it's probably one of my favorite songs of the year, Blinding Moon. Tell me about that track, because holy shit.
Yeah.
That is a mind-blowing song, man. Tell me about that track.
Well, that's actually one of the ones where a lot of the riffs kind of predate the LP. They come from the era of the first tapes, maybe even before the first tape, actually. I'm not totally sure. But, yeah, I would kind of, back then, I would record all of my riff ideas. Now I use the computer more, but... so I was kind of going through old riff recordings and listening to them, and that was the song I had not done, but the kind of main ideas done beforehand, but it was too fast for me to play drums to, so I, you know, shelved it for the time being.
So a lot of this has really been based on like your ability to play drums to it, and then all of a sudden, like, you've got a session drummer, and all these opportunities open up. Is that right?
Sure, yeah, and part of the early stuff was about me, you know, because I can't play the fucking drums. So it was about me, you know, pushing myself or whatever. And that was a big thing, you know, coming from a background of playing simpler music, and then, you know, kind of transitioning into black metal, was trying to not limit myself and, you know, push it as far as I could, I guess, as a musician or as a, you know, physical body. Like, you know, playing drums is very difficult for me. Yeah. So that was a big part of the early stuff. And then, you know, getting the session drummer for the LP kind of made it feel like it all came together at once, you know.
Yeah. So on Blinding... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you have another Blinding Moon question. Go for it.
Oh, well, just in terms of Blinding Moon, you know, we've talked about the GBK influence, but Blinding Moon, a lot of that stuff really struck me as being similar to a band that we talk about all the time on our show, which is Seigneur Voland, is the sort of like French black metal scene, a substantial influence, because I want to kind of get into... Beyond GBK, what are your influences with how you write music?
Yeah, I think that Seigneur Voland and all the Conceptual bands kind of have a very, like, romantic feel to the riffing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I really kind of wanted to accomplish with my own stuff, is just making it feel like it's not limited by modern times. You know, those riffs sound like they could be from, you know, 500 years ago or something.
Yeah, yeah,
really
definitely.
Cool, that's a cool idea.
Do you like,
I think, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, do you fuck with Bakira or Osculum Infame?
Yeah, I got into Bakira recently, actually. Osculum Infame for sure. All the French stuff I think is really cool because it kind of has that feeling of not being barred by time. There's another band called God Killer. I like that stuff a lot. You know, and then LLM stuff, obviously. Just, you know, the French stuff, and, you know, being on Drakkar, you know, Mortifera and Celestia, obviously. Yeah, the French stuff, I think, is just, it has its own feeling of you know, I guess in a more brass tack sense. You know, black metal at its best is about trying to kind of break the chains of modernity and to transcend your own time. I think the French bands have a special way of accomplishing that, and that's something that I want to channel but not copy.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
I think and I think they do it with kind of, I mean, although some of those bands, Bakira, are clearly very good musicians, they do it often in a very stripped down way, right? It's,
well, yeah,
they get
I think
this
look
huge
at those,
sound. Yeah.
those guys don't get enough credit, man. I mean, like, Vlad Tepes said that stuff as very kind of like simple, punky black metal. Dude, those guys can fucking play. I mean, there's insane guitar solos on that Vlad Tepes stuff. The drumming on the Belkatry stuff is insane. Yeah, I mean, those guys can fucking play their instruments, you know, and anybody who thinks otherwise is kidding themselves.
Yeah, that relates to the idea of something we talk about a lot on the show, which is instead of trying to play badly, you be a good musician slumming. All right, it's yeah,
you know,
really
I think with Oldowan Gash, it's you know, I don't. I guess it goes back to the GBK influence. It just, you know, a band that's not afraid to be the best at what they do. And I'm not saying that I'm the best at what I do, but not being afraid to have that attitude.
Mm-hmm. Not being afraid to put yourself out there for judgment, right?
Yeah.
So, in terms of Hubris Unchained itself, is there a sort of like binding conceptual idea around it, or is it just an extension of the early tapes?
Oh, good question. Yeah, no, I haven't thought about it. Well, you know, I guess I do think about it when I was writing. I was often concerned that a lot of the songs were different from one another, but...
well, that's one of the things that makes the record great, is that it does not operate under a single idea, you know?
Yeah, and I guess the way what I told myself in the end was, you know, I wrote all this stuff. You know, it's like I took someone else's ideas and I wrote them all around the same time. So, you know, why wouldn't it work together? It's all me, and you know, I think a lot of bands are often too static. They think, okay, this is our sound, we got to ride with that, and they don't kind of let other things happen. You know, like a big influence for me is like Bellis by Burzum. I think that's such a complete...
Oh, dude, there you go, black metal guy. There you go. Enjoy yourself for the next half hour.
I think that album is such a completely realized vision. I'm not saying it's the best Burzum album, but it's such a vision that's just been honed and sharpened, and it's that's the real deal to me. And especially, like, I think it was 2 years ago, that tape surfaced on YouTube of, like, it was like a riff tape from Prison, and it's Bellis. It's all the ideas that are on Bellis. It's all the same riffs, and it makes you realize, like, oh, he was working on this stuff for you know, at least 7, 8 years, and yeah, it has that idea where, like, you know, every song has these motifs that build, and nothing feels overdone, but everything feels very detail oriented. And that's the kind of thing
like
I aim for. Where, go ahead.
Keep going, man. No.
No, yeah, just
you.
Just wanting to make it feel like it's realized and not. There's a lot of black metal and other kinds of music I like that does feel very kind of off the cuff, you know, shooting from the hip, whatever you want to say. I think that stuff has its place, but for me, I wanted to do something that was, you know, more realized,
very complete, very organized.
Yeah. And it's weird because you, on the one hand, Bellis has this, I think, and I think this is something about your record too, right? Bellis feels, because there are these tight thematic connections between all of the riffs, it feels very natural and flowing and effortless. And, like, you've talked about trying to compose individual riffs or work your way from one riff to another in this very intuitive way. But at the same time, you've got your eye on the whole, like Varg did. You know what I mean? It's like the work that goes into making something feel sort of effortless
Yeah, you hope so. I think at some point you've got to resign yourself and say, this is going to be what it's going to be. Do you know what I mean? You can't, you can't sit there and say, okay, this is track 2 of side A, or whatever. You just kind of got to let it happen.
Let's see, any other songs? Oh, I'm interested in your vocal style. So, your vocals don't really sound like black metal vocals. They sound kind of like, you could say screamo, not in the derogatory sense. You could say, to me on the show, I connected it to like neo-folk yelling, like Cult of Youth or whatever, these kind of punky folk bands. Do you, how did you arrive at your vocal style? Did you try different things, or is this just what comes out?
Well, so what's important to me, I think, with any extreme music now is it should feel sincere. Whether it's like Negative Approach or a black metal record or whatever.
There you go, black metal guy. There you go.
Yeah, yep.
I think it's important to sound like you mean what you're saying, and to sound like you're actually legitimately angry. I think a lot of people will try to sound evil and whatever, and that's cool for those bands. But for me, I wanted to sound, like it was for real. Like I was ready to hop off the stage or out of the speakers and choke you. Like there's actually an LA band, Tucaria. I think that stuff. He really has this way of like. I mean, I've always described it as like school shooter vocals. I mean, he sounds like he's.
We've described a lot of bands amongst ourselves as like school shooter core, so that's very funny.
Yeah, I mean, just I think it's important with black metal or anything to sound like you fucking mean it. With black metal especially, I mean, you should mean it. People should be able to believe what you're doing. And I think if you're just kind of croaking or trying to sound like Nosferatu or something, I mean, that's cool. But I wanted to sound like I was, going nuts and like I was really just screaming. And, the other thing is, dude, I've never fucking practiced my vocals in my life, I just kind of go in there and just scream. I don't know. So it is awesome. Very natural in that way.
A smart thing someone said to me once, a guy from, I was talking with a friend, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm still trying to work on my, I figure out what kind of vocal style I want to go with. Or like, how do you do, I was asking him, he's in a band, I was like, how do you do it? Like how should I like, I've had other friends in like kind of polished hardcore bands tell me, oh, you got to watch this video about technique or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I really need to just work on that. And he was like, no, dude, just scream.
Well, and that's part of the reason the record took so long was because, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and I would blow my voice out. I could do maybe a song or two a week at the most in the studio. Just because I lose my voice or whatever, and it was also hard. I had never done vocals in my life, so like until the Bees, man, I was pretty much wasted when I did that because I just wasn't. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and it was just kind of nerve-wracking. But now I feel more comfortable just kind of getting in there and just not worrying about what I sound like and just trying to believe in what I'm saying.
Well, that's how it ends up good is, you don't give a shit about technique or anything, you just go for it.
I hope so.
No, it sounds good,
it all
man.
sounds really different.
You can find me in the trenches! Fuck yeah, man.
Yeah. You can, that's one of the coolest lines on the record, I think.
Yeah, we mentioned that on the pod. It was like, you can find me in the trenches. We got to get the LPs to figure out what the rest of the lyrics are. Definitely.
Yeah.
It's I think
that line is you can find me in the trenches, bleeding from my nose and grinning from ear to ear.
Oh, that's sick.
That's a good
That's
line.
sick.
It's a great line. It's very Ernst Jünger. I
actually just read that book last week,
Storm of
but
Steel?
I had not read it when I. Yeah, but I had not read it when I did the vocals. But I actually just got, to tie it into the band, I just got his book, The Glass Bees. So I'm going to read that next.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my buddy has read that one, and he says it's really good. I still haven't. Apparently, all the novels are really cool.
There was another one called, I think, Upon the Granite Cliffs, which is like impossible to find, but I really want to read that.
Yeah, that one, I think you can find that. You'd have to go to a library, I think. I know someone who's read
That's what I found out. Because if you want to buy it, it's like $200, but you can go rent it at the public library.
Someone you know who has the access to a university library, I'd say. So, yeah.
So real quick, kind of to wrap this up, like, who are you listening to now? Who are bands that actually matter right now that you want to promote?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll answer it in many ways. You know, when I was doing Hubris Unchained, two big bands I was listening to all the time were Sorhin, Swedish black metal band.
Yes! Dude, we actually
Jesus
just love
Christ.
the same bands. I just talked about Soren for 30 minutes at the end of the last show. So
Yeah, that
not the
stuff's
one we
just
recorded
simply,
today. Yeah.
It's just incredible, that stuff, and also the Chasm from Mexico /
The
US.
Chasm, okay, that's interesting. I kind of get that in a sense.
Well,
and how
I
you write
think
your
it's just
music.
two bands that are, you know, incredibly riffy, but it's not riff soup. It's songs that are cohesive and they make a lot of sense, and both those bands are able to cram a lot of ideas into a song and not make it sound stupid, not make it sound overdone. And that was something that I took a lot of influence from. Definitely, I can't say it enough. For me, how, you know, Sirhus and Bonal still are, you know, just massive influences for me as a 31-year-old, but also as a younger person trying to understand what black metal was and how to kind of develop my own unique understanding of the music. As far as new stuff, you know, I can't keep up. There's too many, you know, for a salad music that just nobody gives a fuck about globally. There is so many bands. It's unbelievable how many black metal and death metal records come out every year. I don't know how it's possible, but bands I keep up with are the same bands I liked 10 years ago. I mean, anything that comes out on Klaxon or on CW, I'll check out. Anybody that I owned a record from 10 years ago, I'll buy the new record. I mentioned to you guys kind of off the record, that new Macabre Omen I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Other stuff, I mean, yeah, there's lots of good new stuff, but also lots of stuff I just don't get around to. And it's what's cool now about having the band is people will get in touch with me. Like, for example, I did an interview last year, 2 years ago, an Oldowan Gash interview with Nocturnal Emissions Zine, which is run by Sam from Carved Cross. And the interview went really well.
Yeah, Carved Cross rules.
Yeah, we started talking, and I was like, "Hey, man, you know, I've actually never heard your fucking band because all your records sell out right away, and I don't have Instagram. I'm not on there like refreshing for records to come out or whatever." And he was like, "Oh man, you know." So
he feels the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, he sent me some stuff, and we talk almost every day now. And we have a lot of similar ideas about black metal, and he sends me their stuff when it comes out, and I send him my stuff when I finish it, you know. So it's cool having, like, you know, real kind of connections like that, because I'm not going to go on some, you know, Chinese big cartel and refresh my browser every 5 minutes. I don't have the patience, but, you know, I've become friends with a lot of those bands, and they'll send me their stuff, and that's really cool to keep up with bands. that are, as new or somewhat new as I am, but like I said, a lot of stuff I don't have the patience. I don't listen to records on YouTube or Bandcamp or any of that. I only, listen to tapes and vinyl and CDs, not because I'm some analog head, but because I spend too much money on music to be at home listening to YouTube. You know what I mean?
No, I get that.
So I can't check out 500 new bands a year because I can't afford it.
That's fair.
So good news. You have Terminus Extreme Metal Podcast to filter everything for you.
So in that case,
I feel like there's certain bands that, Akitsa, Bonal, Sirhus, and the labels those guys run that have kind of earned my loyalty as a listener, as a customer. So, if those guys put out a new thing, I'll always check it out. And there's, other bands that I've been following for a while that I'll keep up with. But as for new bands, it gets hard. There's a new band, actually, I like a lot. I just got the record in the mail yesterday. Blood Libel, Canadian kind of NSBM band. It's really good. That stuff's super riffy, kind of in the GBK vibe. But yeah, it's too much for me. Go ahead.
That was the name of an Antaeus record, I think, back in the day.
Yeah, the French band. Yeah, of course. But yeah, it's too much for me to keep up with this stuff anymore. Not that I'm like over new bands. It just a lot comes out every year, and so yeah, and then similarly, I don't expect everyone to check out Oldowan Gash right away because.
But everybody should.
Well, I'm one of the.
We'll say it for you. It's okay.
Yeah. I'm one of the like 6,000 black metal releases this year, so it's just the market's so flooded, it's hard to keep up, it's hard to care, but I hope that history is kind to the album.
Hey, that's it.
Will be.
Yeah, it fucking should be. So with that in mind, we're gonna end this on one of your tracks. What's the best song on Hubris Unchained? Because both of us have our own opinions, but let's get it from the guy behind it. What's the best song off the album? And I know they're all your children, and they're all great.
They're all different sounding, too, which is a pretty unique thing.
But let's be real. What's the best song on the album?
To pick one is hard. I would say, I think Feral Heart is a really unique song that kind of really came together at the last minute that I'm really happy with. It kind of has a unique feel, but also the closing track, Fortress of Ignorance. That song I'm really happy with. That was one of the first songs I finished writing for the record, and that was the song that at the last show we played, we opened with that song, and also it's the longest, so maybe we should play that one.
Yeah, well, you know what? We played big chunks off Feral Heart on the episode, so yeah, let's do Fortress
and a lot
of
of Blinding Moon, I think.
Yeah, we played a lot of Blinding Moon. So we'll end with Fortress of Ignorance by, once again, Oldowan Gash off his record Hubris Unchained. Outstanding record. Thank you so much, Forlorn Spirit, for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.